This is a somewhat typical kind of setup here, system setup here. And so we have, so we have a bunch of indicators. We have two moving averages. Actually, we're not looking at the slope anymore. So let's remove that. There we go. So we have two moving averages using the CCI and the MACD histogram, or difference, as NinjaTrader calls it there. Right, so here we go. So we can see all that. So we can see the MACD difference on the bottom, the CCI, and one of the moving averages here. All right, so for a long trade, the system rules here are, we need the faster moving average above the slower moving average. This second one here, I'm going to skip down to the MACD. So the MACD needs to be either above the zero line or crossing that zero line within, the next 3 bars or so. So down there, pretty straightforward. And the one here that has a little more complication here is the CCI. So that CCI needs to go below -100 and then cross above the zero line there, also within a few bars as well. Although, knowing the CCI, it's pretty fast. So usually that CCI does go from -100 to 0, within a few bars there. So, all right, and that's it. So once we have those 3 requirements, then we generate a buy signal there. And then tomorrow we'll hook this into Blackbird and set up a stop entry order, a few ticks above the high of the signal bar. All right, so that's it. Pretty straightforward there. So, all right, there we go. Indicator's all set up, ready to go. All right, we'll start with the easy requirement there. All right, just comparing the fast moving average to the slower one. So let's get BloodHound open. And let's see here. So we're checking to see if the fast moving average is above or below the slow moving average, So we're comparing the two there. So that would be a comparison solver. So essentially that's what the comparison solver does, is it checks to see if input A is above or below input B. So, all right, let's connect that in. And it's always a good idea to put in the indicator names there so you know what this comparison solver is doing. There we go. All right, so input A will be the 34 period. So let's open up the indicator. Here we go. So we already have the SMA, as a default placeholder there. So just put in a 34 period. And for input B, same thing. Let's open that up and put in the period there, 75. And there we have it. All right, pretty straightforward. So fast above the slow. And we have a long output, vice versa, short output. All right. Now, let's do the MACD there. All right. So this time, we want to know if the MACD is above or below the zero line, which the zero line in this case is a threshold level. So we're going to use the threshold solver. So connect that in. And also, let's give this a name. There we go. All right. And plug in the MACD indicator here. Let's open this up. All right. Use the little search box there. It does make things go a little quicker. There we go. All right. So, as we can see, I don't have any indicator settings for this. So we're just going to go with all the default indicator settings. But one thing we do need to do is change our plot, You can see the actual MACD line is selected by default. So this time we want to use the difference line or the histogram. All right, there we have it. And also we're comparing that, right, against the 0 line. So just to show you, we don't need to make any changes, but in the threshold rules, let's open that up, right? This is where you would put that threshold level, but 0 is the default there. But if you wanted to be a little more conservative, you could say, okay, MACD needs to cross the 0.1 line or needs to cross the negative 0.1 line, right? Something like that. So, but let's put that all back to 0, like so. All right, and this doesn't happen that often, but you never know. Sometimes that MACD can actually equal 0. So just in case, I'm going to use the greater than or equals to 0 for a long signal there. So that means a short signal will actually no. You know what? We'll put the equals in there for a short as well, just in case. All right, so there we go. So again, look at our chart, right? When the histogram is above the 0, right, we're getting a long output and a short output. So now we can actually start combining things together like so, and there we have some filtering going on, right? So let's see here. Last thing here. All right, so let's get to the CCI. So we want that CCI, right, needs to first cross above the negative 100 and then cross the 0 line. Yeah, and then cross the 0 line there. So we're going to need a couple of crossovers here. So let's go back and let's add a crossover. All right, let's connect that in. And let's see. All right, so we're looking to cross over the negative 100. Actually, yeah, we're going to need 2 crossovers for this. All right, so let's rename this a cross up. All right, let's see here. All right, so input A is going to be the CCI, right, the main indicator. And let's do a little search there. All right, there's our CCI. All right, again, just using the default settings there, and there's only one plot, so nothing to do. Just click OK. Now, for the negative 100, in input B, we're going to change the input type to a fixed value. So, all right, so let's put in negative 100. And so there we go. So every time, right, so we can see we get a short when it crosses down below negative 100, right, and a long when it crosses up. So we're only interested in the longs here. So we're going to go to the evaluate and show the long only signals. There we go. Now we need the opposite of this for when the CCI goes above positive 100. So let's make a copy of that and let's paste that there. Connect that in and adjust our name. So this is going to be a cross down of the positive 100 there. So for the evaluate, we're going to put in shorts there. And then for input B, we're going to change this to a positive number. So let's take out the negative there. And I lost my cursor. There we go. All right, there we go. Take out the negative symbol there. And there we have it, right? Crossing down 100, crossing down positive 100, so on and so forth. So there we go. And now, both of these basically are one condition, right? So we're going to join them together with an OR node. Connect that in, and there we have it. So now we have the long cross ups and the short cross downs, right? As essentially as one condition now. All right, so there's the beginning part of the CCI. Now we need to add in the crossing of the zero line there. So let's see here. Let's copy. Actually, no, I don't need to copy that. I can just do another paste. Yeah, there we go. Now this time it's going to be a crossover of the zero line there. So let's go reset our evaluate back to both long and short there, and the crossover value is going to just be 0, and there we have it. All right, now normally, well, actually no, this is what we do here is we need both of these conditions, right? So connect that in and connect that into an AND node, right? So right, we want we want this condition first, and it keeps grabbing that guy. There we go. Let's move that out of the way. All right, rearrange all that like so. Now, right, so we need both of these conditions, right, to happen kind of together here. So when you join them together with an AND node, right, we can see we get nothing. And why is that? Well, should be pretty apparent, right? The crossing of the 100 values there happens first, and then crossing the 0 doesn't happen until a few bars later, right? So we need to take these signals and extend them forward in time until the 0 line crossing happens. So since we're using crossover solvers, we can actually use this look back period here, and that can do that for us. So let me just increase this a little bit, and there we go, right? So when it crosses above -100, then if we say 4, then we get 4 bars with that crossover signal there. And so now we have to ask ourselves, all right, so how many bars does it actually take, right, for the CCI to always reach that 0 line there? And so that's the subjective part there. And let's go back to the screenshot here. And it does, well, these bars are spaced out pretty far here. Yeah, so it looks like maybe it might take about 5 or 6 bars. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and just for good measure, we'll increase this to 6, right? So that's the crossing the -100. So we need to do the same thing for crossing the +100, right? So we're going to take this look back period and also increase it to 6 as well there. And there we have it. All right. Now, one thing to note here, right, is when we're using the crossover solver look back period, like look at this right here, right? So we crossed down the 100, and then it crossed back up. And when it crossed back up, you can see that 6-bar look back came to an end, right? So sometimes that's a big benefit there, all right? And maybe not. So usually there's 2 or more 2 ways, probably not more, but usually there's 2 ways to kind of accomplish the same thing. And so in this case there is. So instead of using this look back period, if we wanted to, we could use one of the function nodes here and use a signal extender, right? And go with that. And so if I look at the signal extender there, we can see it's defaulted to 5, extending for 5 bars, right? And so now we have signal extension of right, 6 bars from the crossover solvers, right? They're basically extending out 6 bars plus the signal extender, which is another 5 bars, right? So we get this really long period. But so you would use one or the other, right? I'm not suggesting that you use both. So yeah, with crossover solvers, you could either use the look back period to extend those crossover signals forwards, or we could use a signal extender there. But with the signal extender, right, you don't have that benefit, well, not directly, but it's with the signal extender, it's not built in that if you have a crossover in the opposite direction, you know, that the extension gets terminated, right? So you can do that with the signal extender using the resets nodes here. But anyways, this is not a lesson on the signal extender, but just you know, be mindful. You could either use the signal extender, or as what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to just use the built-in look back here to extend those forward there. So now let's take a look at the AND node here, and there we have it. Let's see here. I just want to see if I could find a good example here. Well, this isn't exact. Oh, here we go. Here's what I'm looking for. Right, so we have the CCI crossing the 0 line, right? But it didn't cross below the -100. So there we go. Now over here it crossed below the -100 and then crossed the 0 line, and there we have, right, a long crossover signal. So yeah. Now right, one thing to note is when you're connecting two conditions together, like we're doing here, right, that extension period, right, the number of bars that we're extending for here, obviously, you know, that plays an important role because we can see here the CCI crossed below +100, and then it crossed the 0 line, but it took its time, right? It kind of floundered around, and there's no signal there because that took more than 6 bars. So, you know, so you got to ask yourself if, you know, if this is still a valid situation, then you just need to go back and increase, right, the look back period until you do get a signal there. And actually, it looks like this is taking quite some time. 10 bars? There we go. So that actually took 10 bars, right? So again, right, so these are the, you know, the finer details of what you have to figure out when you're building a system there. So I'm just going to put this back to 6. So like so. All right. Now let's connect this in to the rest of the system here and take a look. Let's see. Now, yeah, so far we're not getting any signals, and that's probably because we haven't actually addressed the MACD fully here. So remember, here it said sometimes it could take up to 3 bars, right? So what we should do is actually, let's see here. Yeah, you know what? This is really a crossover here as well. I did use a threshold solver. So actually I'm going to just stick that to the side here, and let's Let's grab a crossover solver instead. And let's connect that in. And let me give this a name. There. All right, so let's plug in our MACD. All right, there we go. And we're using the difference line. And here we go. So with the with the crossover solver, we have this look back period. So I can set that up like so. Oh, and also input B. We need to switch this to a fixed value. There we go. So we're looking right at the crossing of that 0 line there. So there we go. So there's all those crossovers like so. All right, so let's connect that in, right? And so without the MACD condition, right, we can see we do have, right, a bunch of signals there. And yeah, actually, look, this kind of helps us visually see here, right? Yeah, we had the CCI crossing a little early before the MACD had a chance to catch up there. So it looks like it will take 1, 2, maybe 3. It's kind of hard to tell. Yeah, 1, 2, and I think on the 3rd bar there, it did cross. And same thing here, right? This was 1 bar early before the MACD crossed. So using a crossover solver, right, with that 3-bar extension there. And let's see here. And all right, just need to do a little reload here. And yeah, let's go reload the chart. And still no signals. All right, what's going on? Well, all right, time to do some troubleshooting here. All right, so we have a cross up there, cross up there. All right, there we go. So that's our CCI. Now let's check the MACD. All right, yep, so we have the MACD afterwards. Now, of course, this short's going to get filtered out by the moving averages there. And let's see, it doesn't look like our MACD. Yeah, our MACD doesn't cross down there. All right, so we should at least be getting this signal here. All right. Yeah, we have that and that. Oh. Yeah, there we go. My mistake. So actually, and actually my mistake. So I'm looking at this wrong. So actually the CCI needs time to catch up. Not the MAC, or I'm sorry, yeah, the CCI needs to be extended forward while the MACD catches up there. Okay, yeah, right, details matter a lot. Okay, so on the MACD here, I'm going to set the look back down to 1, like so, and instead, right, I need to extend the CCI. So I am going to go grab a signal extender here, connect that in. There we go. And it looks like we only need to extend for 3 bars. So there we go. We'll knock that down to 3. And then we're going to connect our signal extender in. So let's disconnect that AND node and connect that in. And there we go. All right. Now we have it. Okay. So actually, we didn't actually use the threshold solver. So, we could have, in this situation, we could have used the threshold solver. There is still a benefit to using a crossover solver here for the MACD, which is, right, when that MACD does cross that zero line, right, that is the trigger point there of the signal. And the benefit of using the crossover is you get a single clean crossover signal, right? You just get one clean signal there. Whereas if we go with the threshold solver, right, we have an output the entire time, right? On every bar we have an output there, right? So let's take a look, right? Here's our signals using the crossover solver on the MACD. And there we go. We got nice, right? Three clean signals there. Now, if I disconnect the crossover and connect in the threshold solver, right? There we go. Sometimes we might get, 4 signals or 3 signals, right? So we might get multiple signals, right? And that's because the MACD is above that zero line the entire time, right? So we're dealing with this continuous output using the threshold solver versus, right, the crossover solver is a single signal, at the crossover event, right? So, so sometimes you do need the threshold solver where you need this continuous output here, but just kind of looking at reading the description here, and also of course looking at the indicators and the charts, right? That MACD is pretty much I should say, is the final triggering condition that generates the signal there. So in those situations, you're typically going to want a crossover solver here. So let's disconnect that, connect that back in, right? And that way we get a nice clean 1 bar signal, right? A single signal there. Right. So, and I guess just to go a little further here, since this is an educational room, so that's it. We're done with the system. It's done and built here. But if we did have to use the threshold solver, right, which a lot of times, you're going to end up with signals here where there's multiple signals, multiple signal bars, right, in a row. That can easily be cleaned up by the signal blocker, right? That's the purpose of the signal blocker, is to go in and clean that up, and now we're back to a single signal, right? One signal bar there, right? So, but as good best practices here, right? The less number of nodes that you're utilizing, then the less load or less computational requirements there is on your CPU, right? So you can keep, your NinjaTrader running cleaner and faster by minimizing the number of nodes when possible, right? So it doesn't mean, you have to go out of your way to figure out how to minimize the number of nodes, but on something like this, right, it keeps it pretty obvious there. So there we go. Let's connect that back up. And I'm going to just delete the MACD here off the chart. And let's put that back in place. There we go. Let's center that there. And also, let's see, yeah. I'm also going to remove that MACD threshold solver from the list here as well, so it's not unnecessarily doing any calculations there. So we can just right click on that and hit delete, and there we go. So, all right, now we are ultimately done here. Oh, and let's also give this a name here. Let's see here. There we go. All right, so really this is kind of a, I guess I would call this a CCI and MACD kind of signal there, and right, using some moving averages to filter those. There, okay, now we got that. There we have it. All right, let me go back to the Q&A window here, see if there's any follow-up questions on this. And all right, yeah, it has a pretty simple question here. All right, yeah, so quickly here, Wayne is asking about one of the crossover solvers here. Yeah, so the question is, what is this solver doing here under the OR node, right? So this logic right there is, here, let's connect this in, right? That is, and stretch this out here, right? So that is identifying crossing the 100, right? And then extending that crossover forward so that the crossing of the 0 can happen, right? And vice versa, crossing negative 100, and then take that crossover, extend it forward until the CCI can cross the 0 line there, right? So this is the, I guess, the pre-CCI values there, right? So we could kind of name this here. Something like that. And then this crossover solver is the one that identifies crossing the 0 line, right? So there's the CCI crossing up, and then the CCI crossing down, and then we can see, right, we have the CCI doing a couple of switchbacks there on that 0 line, and right, so there we go, short, long, short, so on and so forth. So, and then the AND node, right, is everything combined together there. So we have the CCI crossing 100 and then going down to the 0 line, bingo, right? And then we have the CCI crossing negative 100 and then getting to the 0 line and crossing that. Right. So that's why you name your solvers. So you can look at the name there. You can go, oh, this is a CCI crossing over the 0. Okay, that's what that's doing, right? And same with the other ones here, right? You can see the other ones also have a value in the name there, right? A cross up and a cross down. So, yeah. And also, I do like to put the value in for the signal extenders, right? So this is a 3-bar signal extender. So I do like to put the number in there, and then I'll just shorten up the name there for good measure. There we go. There. All right, there we go. There. Okay, there we go. Looks like that's it for the follow-ups here.